A judge chuckled upon hearing that 17-year-old Naomi was representing her cousin in court, but the entire courtroom fell silent by the time she concluded her statement. The courtroom held a subtle aroma of coffee and aged floor polish. Fluorescent lights hummed above as Naomi Ellison proceeded through the double doors, holding a substantial manila folder close. Her walk was determined, though it was evident she had practiced it before a mirror. Her thrift store slacks were a little too short, the white shirt just slightly wrinkled, and her bun, braided tight and pinned, had loosened a little in the Georgia humidity. Despite this, she kept her head high. 17 years old, not a lawyer, not even a college student, she was present to defend her cousin, and she wasn't planning on being dismissed. It was late morning in the Berrien County Courthouse in Nashville, Georgia, a modest building where everyone knew everyone. This was not a courtroom known for dramatic proceedings. It typically handled minor traffic offenses, small claims, and occasional custody disputes. Judge Byron Talcott had served on the bench for almost 3 decades. People in town remarked that he seemed from an earlier era, a diplomatic way of noting his resistance to change and his limited acceptance of it within his courtroom. As Naomi announced her role as Deshaun Little's legal representative, Judge Talcott peered over his glasses, appearing bewildered. "You're what now?" he inquired, looking down at the docket. "I'm representing my cousin in this case," Naomi stated, her voice unwavering. "I prepared a written argument, and—" He interrupted her. "You're not a lawyer," he said, a slight laugh escaping his lips. A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom. It seemed impossible that she was young enough to drive, let alone practice law. Several individuals adjusted their positions to observe her more closely. A man seated in the rear even smiled, seemingly anticipating an amusing spectacle. Naomi remained composed. Her expression didn't change, and her hands were steady. She nodded once, opened her documents, and stated, with respect, "Your Honor, Georgia law permits individuals to represent others in non-criminal proceedings, provided both parties agree." Judge Talcott raised an eyebrow. "And you're telling me he consents to this?" Deshaun, seated beside her in jeans and a t-shirt, leaned toward the microphone. "Yes, sir, I do." A subtle change permeated the atmosphere. Naomi cleared her throat and added, "I'm prepared to proceed if the court is willing." The judge reclined in his chair, pausing for an extended moment. Then he smirked and waved his hand dismissively. "Fine. This will be interesting." The bailiff, an older man named Wiggins, inclined himself forward a little, focusing his gaze on Naomi with a hint of curiosity rather than disapproval. Naomi organized her documents with precision. She positioned her handwritten notes before her, turning to the page marked Opening Statement. Her script was precise, so precise that it seemed impossible anyone could have written it hastily. As she prepared to speak, a laugh escaped someone situated in the back of the room. The judge made no move to quiet it, nor did Naomi. She simply commenced. Before she could elaborate further, the judge interrupted her once more. "Miss Ellison, for the sake of argument, could you please state where you obtained your law degree?" She met his gaze steadily. "I do not possess one, but I have dedicated the past 2 years to studying Georgia traffic law, civil procedure, and judicial conduct during my leisure time. I've attended public hearings in 3 counties, transcribed trial footage, and reviewed over 50 court opinions. I do not possess a degree, but I am present to ensure the court's time is used productively." The room was silent now. Even the clerk had ceased typing. However, Judge Talcott still had one more maneuver prepared. Judge Talcott exhaled audibly through his nose, seemingly considering whether this was a misuse of time or an opportunity for spectacle. He shifted slightly in his chair and offered Naomi a brief, dismissive gesture. "Very well, Miss Ellison." Naomi remained unfazed. She delivered her introduction with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed it repeatedly. And she had. In her bedroom, she practiced, standing before a mirror with her backpack used as a makeshift podium. Her voice remained steady as she presented the details. Deshaun had been stopped by police for failing to stop at a stop sign outside the high school on a Saturday morning. There was no other traffic, and no pedestrians present. Despite this, the infraction resulted in a court summons and a significant financial penalty. Naomi's goal wasn't merely to dispute the fine. She aimed for its complete dismissal. In the second row, a white woman wearing a peach blazer spoke softly to the man beside her. He responded with a chuckle and a shake of his head. The clerk reclined in her chair, clicking her pen, anticipating Naomi's misstep. And Deshawn? He glanced at his hands, apprehensive, perhaps even a little irritated. "You sure you want to do this?" He had asked her that morning while they waited outside the courthouse. Naomi had answered without lifting her eyes from her notes. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." He remained silent after that. Now, seated beside her at the defendant's table, he fidgeted in his chair, seemingly wishing he could vanish. He was 17 as well, but Naomi made him feel even younger simply by being next to him. Naomi then addressed the matter of selective enforcement. The stop sign in question had been disregarded by numerous drivers that morning, including 2 local sheriff's deputies. Naomi possessed video footage captured by a neighbor, which was time-stamped and easily discernible. The footage displayed vehicles proceeding without interruption. There were no visible lights, no audible sirens, and no issued citations. She positioned a small USB drive on the table and raised her gaze toward the judge. "With the court's permission, I'd like to submit this as evidence." Judge Talcott remained still for a moment. Then, deliberately, he turned his attention to the bailiff. "Let's take a look." The screen activated. The courtroom's attention focused. The video consisted of straightforward street footage captured by a home security camera. Vehicle after vehicle passed the sign without pausing. Naomi allowed the recording to play for 20 seconds before stopping it and indicating a license plate belonging to a county sheriff. "I'm not suggesting that the law shouldn't be enforced," she stated, "only that it should be enforced fairly." There was no laughter this time. The judge, however, crossed his arms. "And you believe this demonstrates your cousin was treated unfairly?" Naomi replied concisely. "It demonstrates that enforcement lacks consistency. And when enforcement lacks consistency, citations can become subjective." He observed her intently for a moment. Naomi remained composed under his gaze. What the majority of individuals present didn't realize, couldn't possibly know, was her dedication over the previous 2 summers, secretly attending hearings in 3 counties. She documented proceedings with a well-used pen, quietly reciting legal terminology into a tape recorder obtained from her science teacher. No one had instructed her in these actions. Her high school lacked law electives, and internship opportunities for girls like her were scarce in Berrien County. Consequently, she pursued self-study. She dedicated late nights to reading legal blogs and case opinions while her mom worked double shifts at the nursing home. She prioritized this over socializing, foregoing parties and school dances. It was her chosen path. Now, upon her first opportunity to apply her knowledge, those present perceived her as a young person pretending. "I'll accept her." The judge cleared his throat. "We'll admit the video for review." "Continue." Naomi nodded and kept going, but the atmosphere hadn't changed yet. People still looked at her as if this would inevitably fail. But then Naomi said something that even made the court reporter lift her head. Naomi placed her palms flat on the table, leaned in just a little, and said, "This citation isn't just about a stop sign. It's about accountability. The question of whether authority figures, including officers, are held to the same standards as those they stop." That specific phrasing resonated powerfully. It didn't appear scripted, but its impact was undeniable. A noticeable silence fell over the room, unlike any that had come before. The murmuring ceased, and the expression softened. The clerk paused her pen-chewing habit. Even Judge Talcott reacted, seemingly surprised by her candid remark. Deshawn observed his cousin with a newfound perspective. He had always recognized her intelligence. Family members had expressed similar sentiments. However, this situation felt different. Naomi proceeded swiftly, turning to the subsequent page of her materials. Her notes were meticulously organized with a color-coded highlighting system. Blue indicated facts, green represented legal principles, and yellow marked quotes she had committed to memory. She began discussing Owens versus State of Georgia, a 1999 case concerning traffic enforcement and racial bias. She methodically reviewed the court's opinion, detailing it line by line, and clarified how the court recognized that unequal enforcement damaged public confidence. The judge intervened. "Ms. Ellison, are you drawing a comparison to the Owens case?" "That involved." She remained steady. "The relevant legal principles remain applicable, Your Honor. Selective enforcement compromises the fairness of any legal process, irrespective of whether it is criminal or civil." He reclined once more, his expression now neutral. The courtroom was fully engaged as well. The woman in the peach blazer now sat forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and intently listened. The man beside her put away his phone. Naomi proceeded. She presented traffic enforcement statistics from Willow Creek County, figures she had obtained via a Freedom of Information Act request and printed at the public library. The data revealed that 83% of traffic stops during the previous year involved black drivers, while census data indicated they comprised just under 40% of the population. She placed the documents before her. "I'm not suggesting anyone intentionally targeted my cousin," she stated. "The court is being asked to consider the established pattern. Ignoring patterns allows them to persist. This presentation is devoid of theatrics or raised voices. It is simply a recitation of facts and a quiet, direct assessment." Judge Talcott reviewed his notes, tapped his pen against the folder before him, then made a notation. The bailiff, Wiggins, folded his arms, not as an act of opposition, but in attentive listening. Deshawn murmured, "Yo, did you really obtain all those numbers?" Naomi murmured, her gaze fixed on the judge. "It took me 3 weeks." Deshawn blinked, surprised by the intensity of her statement. A cough echoed from a few rows behind. Yet no one chuckled. The judge remained silent, examining the printed documents before returning his attention to Naomi. "You've certainly done your homework, Miss Ellison," he observed. She offered a single nod, composed and prepared. Then, for the first time since she entered the courtroom, Naomi hesitated. The silence wasn't due to a lapse in her speech, but because she had arrived at the critical juncture of her argument. Her statement emphasized that the matter wasn't about achieving victory, it was about fairness. She affirmed that if the court found her cousin had indeed violated the law, they would abide by the decision. However, she insisted that if citations were to be issued in Cedar Creek County, they needed to carry consistent meaning regardless of the driver. This was the pivotal moment, not when she referenced legal precedent, nor when she presented the statistics. The sincerity of that statement seemed to resonate, and the judge closed his folder. "Let's take a 10-minute recess." Gasps weren't permitted in courtrooms, yet they were audible, noticeable in the subtle shifts of people and the murmured comment, "He never does that." During that brief pause, Naomi experienced her initial wave of genuine uncertainty. She sat on the unyielding wooden bench outside the courtroom, knees drawn close, hands tightly clasped around a bottle of water she hadn't opened. The braid at the nape of her neck was loosening, but she made no move to adjust it. She fixed her gaze straight ahead, seemingly observing something unseen by others. Deshawn sat next to her, his leg bouncing, his eyes darting frequently. "You good?" he eventually asked. She nodded, then murmured, "Yeah, but you don't seem it." A faint smile touched her lips. "I didn't come here to look good," he chuckled, then added more seriously, "Hey, thank you. For real. I didn't think you'd go that deep." She turned towards him. "You didn't think I meant it?" "I mean, I knew you were smart. I simply didn't realize you were this intelligent." Naomi did not respond. The courtroom door opened, and the bailiff motioned toward them. "Let's return to the matter at hand." Inside, the atmosphere had changed. The laughter from before had disappeared, yielding to a more subdued feeling. It wasn't quite respect. It wasn't quite admiration. It was simply focused attention. Judge Talcott observed Naomi when she re-entered. This time, he didn't squint or smirk. He continued to evaluate her. "Miss Ellison," he stated as she resumed her testimony, "let's hypothetically consider, just for a moment, that your assertion is valid. Could you please reference any specific wording in the law that would directly justify dismissing your cousin's citation? Naomi responded promptly. Yes, sir. Georgia Code, Section 40 to 620 details proper stop sign enforcement, but it also allows for interpretation regarding situations where enforcement might be applied unevenly or selectively. Moreover, the Equal Protection Clause, as defined in Yick Wo v. Hopkins, dictates that selective enforcement predicated on arbitrary distinctions compromises the law's legitimacy. The courtroom fell silent once more. The judge inclined himself forward, resting his elbows on his desk, observing her as if searching for a weakness. I notice you're quite well informed, he remarked. Yes, Your Honor. He then stated, his voice a little more pointed, that if she intended to cite Yick Wo, she should also be ready to discuss its relevance beyond licensing matters. She affirmed, explaining that the ruling's core principle extended beyond licenses. It concerned fairness under the law. The ruling explicitly stated that even seemingly neutral laws could not be applied in a discriminatory manner. For the first time, Judge Talcott refrained from interrupting, allowing her to complete her statement. He then folded his hands and looked directly at her. Miss Ellison, he said, speaking almost calmly now, what exactly do you want from this court? Naomi took a breath. I want my cousin's citation dismissed, and I want the court to acknowledge that enforcement patterns in this county deserve closer scrutiny. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The judge examined the documents before him, then surveyed the courtroom, and lastly turned his gaze to Naomi. Unexpectedly, he posed a question. May I review your notes? Naomi was taken aback. I'm sorry, he repeated. Your notes. It's evident you've invested significant effort. I'd appreciate the opportunity to examine them. The inquiry was unusual. Judges rarely made such requests. Naomi approached and presented the notes. Her hand briefly touched the bench, but she maintained her balance. The judge examined the pages, methodically, handwritten, color-coded, and arranged with the precision of a junior associate at a leading downtown Atlanta firm. This is remarkable, he stated after a prolonged pause. The courtroom remained silent. He then added, however, you must understand that argument isn't always sufficient in court. Sometimes, regardless of how just you are, the structure doesn't yield. Naomi did not avert her gaze. Then perhaps the structure requires pressure. The judge raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, someone in the gallery stood. The woman who stood in the back row appeared to be in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back tightly and a black blouse buttoned to the neck. She seemed like someone who didn't speak unless it was important. Your Honor, she called out, her voice steady but quiet. Judge Talcott turned slowly. Ma'am, you need to sit down. This isn't open for public comment. But the woman did not flinch. I am Judith Minter. As a retired attorney with 41 years of experience in civil litigation, I feel compelled to state, for the record, that this young lady presented one of the most well-structured arguments I've observed in a courtroom, even among federal proceedings. While gasps weren't permitted, an audible intake of breath was clearly heard from half the gallery. Judge Talcott visibly stiffened but remained silent, simply observing Naomi. A fleeting, unreadable expression crossed his face. Frustration? Perhaps. Or something else entirely. He announced another recess. Naomi hurried outside. Her chest felt constricted, and her hands trembled slightly this time. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything. The room, the atmosphere, the abrupt quiet that followed the woman's statement. Deshawn followed her and sat next to her once more. You all right? He inquired. She hesitated before responding. Her fingers moved restlessly in her lap. Why would she say that? Naomi asked, almost to herself. Why would someone like her defend me? Deshawn shrugged, because she observed what everyone else had seen. Naomi allowed her shoulders to relax a little. Her entire body had been rigid for more than an hour, and she hadn't been aware of it. The courtroom doors opened again, and Naomi was surprised when Judith Minter emerged and approached her. Miss Ellison, she said softly as she sat down next to her on the bench. Do you understand the sort of bravery it requires to stand where you just stood? Particularly without the qualifications. That's not something that can be fabricated. Naomi began to speak, but Judith raised a hand. I'm not attempting to compliment you, she said. I'm stating a fact. And if you ever consider a career in law, I mean professionally, please contact me. I know individuals who would be fortunate to guide someone with your potential. Naomi paused, unsure how to respond. All she could say was, thank you. Judith smiled, then rose. Finish well. Don't allow him to manipulate you. He possesses more intelligence than he conveys, but he's likely to show you deference if you remain perceptive. Following that, the woman vanished down the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the tile. Deshawn turned to Naomi, a combination of awe and disbelief evident on his face. Yo, who are you right now? She offered a quiet, almost weary laugh. I'm just me. However, something in her demeanor had shifted. The anxiety was still present, but it no longer dominated. Not entirely. The bailiff entered the room. They're ready. Naomi stood, adjusted her shirt, and retrieved her folder. As she re-entered the courtroom, there were no whispers, no smirks, and Judge Talcott no longer leaned back as if dismissing her. Instead, he leaned forward. Naomi returned to the table, arranged her closing statement, and awaited approval. The judge offered a brief nod. Proceed. She took a final breath to compose herself, and then she began. The words she was about to speak would silence the entire courtroom. Naomi spoke calmly, no need for raised tones. My cousin is a teenager. He committed a minor error. But if the law isn't applied equally to all, young, old, black, white, officer, civilian, then it ceases to be law. It transforms into a suggestion, or, even more detrimentally, punishment for some and a caution for others. A stillness fell over the room. No one moved. Every gaze in that room was focused on her. Even the clerk, who had kept her fingers poised over the keyboard, was frozen midair. She continued, we've all heard that justice is blind, but it shouldn't be deaf. It shouldn't ignore patterns, or silence people who speak up about them. Naomi walked slowly to the evidence table, pulled up the citation, and held it out. This citation isn't just about a stop sign. It's about the choice to enforce, or not enforce, the law based on who's in the driver's seat. Her voice remained steady, almost calm, but her words carried significant weight. She addressed the judge. You inquired previously about what I sought from this court. I stated then that I desired the citation dismissed, and I maintain that desire. However, I also want recognition that fairness should not be something earned through appearances or background. It should be inherent, a given, for all. Judge Talcott looked down, tapping the citation folder again with the corner of his pen. He remained silent. Not yet. I may not hold a degree, Naomi stated, but I've gained knowledge observing courtrooms and opinions and law books over the past 2 years. I've learned that when justice functions correctly, it isn't felt as dominance. It feels like understanding, like recognition that you were listened to. Her voice faltered just a little at that final word, not enough to disrupt her flow, but enough to serve as a reminder to those present that she remained a teenager, still human, still someone who shouldn't have been required to prepare for this. She closed her folder and stepped back. Silence. A full 10 seconds elapsed before Judge Talcott finally exhaled. He adjusted his glasses, surveyed the courtroom, then focused his eyes on Naomi. I've been doing this for a long time, he said, long enough to recognize when someone enters this courtroom with something prepared, and when they enter with something authentic. He paused. You, Miss Ellison, you presented something authentic. Another pause. I am dismissing the citation. The issue isn't related to your cousin's connections, but rather the manner in which you presented this case. Furthermore, the evidence you offered prompted questions that this court cannot disregard. A murmur arose within the gallery, marked by surprise, quietness, and deference, yet he had not concluded. Judge Talcott moved forward, placing his hands on the desk. To be candid, I initially found amusement in your presentation, and that was an error. You didn't simply prepare, you informed this courtroom, and myself included. You maintained your position in a setting not intended for someone of your stature to speak with authority. And I believe this will not be the last instance. He tapped the gavel once. Not forcefully, simply to conclude proceedings. Court is adjourned. Naomi remained still initially. Deshawn observed her, as if she were an unfamiliar person. Or perhaps he was at long last perceiving the version of her that had always existed. Those present in the gallery did not immediately leave. Several approached her discreetly. The clerk even nodded once, murmuring, "Nice work, kid." Naomi held her folder close to her chest again. But now it didn't seem like a shield. It felt like a credential. As she and Deshawn walked out into the sun, he nudged her. "You're going to be on somebody's billboard one day." She laughed. "Not unless they catch me on a good hair day." He smiled wide. "Nah, I mean it. You changed something in there." Naomi looked ahead at the street, eyes squinting against the light. "I hope so." What followed would demonstrate that this instance marked merely the commencement of events. A week later, Naomi found herself once again in her bedroom, amidst piles of notebooks, scattered pens, and her aged school laptop adorned with discolored stickers. Her triumph at the courthouse had been reported in the local news. It wasn't extensive coverage, simply a few brief mentions in the Nashville Herald and a Facebook post from an individual who had been present in the gallery. However, the phone call that fundamentally altered the situation did not originate from a journalist. The call originated from the office of attorney Roland Brewster, located in Macon. She nearly ignored it, as the phone number was unknown and her mom had cautioned her against answering unrecognized calls. However, an intuition prompted her to answer. "Is this Naomi Ellison?" A voice inquired. "Yes," she replied. "This is Angela from the office of Roland Brewster. He would like to speak with you, if you're available." Naomi straightened on the bed. Certainly?" A click was heard. A man's voice then spoke, warm yet straightforward. "Naomi, my name is Roland. I've been practicing law in Georgia for 27 years. A colleague of mine, Judith Minter, sent me a copy of your court presentation. She said I'd be a fool not to reach out." Naomi remained silent initially, not due to nerves, as she wasn't feeling them. She was simply uncertain if it was genuine. "I want to offer you something," he continued. "It's not a job, yet, but it's a mentorship, one that could develop into something further. There's a summer program designed for young, creative thinkers. We want you to be a part of it." She discovered her ability to speak up. "But I haven't started college yet. I haven't even finished high school." He chuckled. "That's not important. We're not seeking degrees. We're looking for minds capable of sparking change." Naomi looked at her notes. The same ones she'd used in court, now spread across her desk like discarded awards. "I'm intrigued," she said. "Excellent," Brewster replied. "Please send me a copy of that argument." Following the call, Naomi remained still for an extended period. She didn't move or smile, simply taking everything in. A change had occurred. The courtroom proceedings were over. However, her personal journey, that unconventional path she had constructed independently, using library books and YouTube lectures, was no longer hidden. Her mom entered the room. "Are you hungry?" she inquired. Naomi nodded, feeling ravenous. Sitting opposite each other at the small kitchen table, her mom inquired, "Do you truly desire to pursue this? Law? Seriously?" Naomi ate her sandwich deliberately, then responded, "Yes. I believe I already am." Her mom offered a look, a drawn-out, probing expression unique to mothers, and then nodded once. Following this, she stated, "Then you better continue demonstrating your capabilities." That evening, Naomi remained up reading, driven not by obligation, but by a sense of purpose. Analyzing legal precedent felt less like an assignment and more like a language she was finally proficient in. The following morning, she received another call, this time from a high school student from 2 towns over. "Hey," the girl said, "I saw what you did. My brother's case is similar. I don't know where to begin. Could I ask you a question?" And with that, Naomi evolved into something more, not just a bright student, not just a relative advocating for family. She stood as an illustration, a demonstration that excellence doesn't await authorization, and fairness doesn't demand a position, but only truth, clarity, and the courage to speak. She didn't require a law degree to impact a courtroom. She simply needed an opportunity. And when she received it, she ensured no one would ever perceive her identically again. Your voice doesn't need a platform. It merely needs to be heard. If Naomi's story resonated with you, ensure you subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded. The key isn't the origin, but the level of dedication you demonstrate. Judge Holbrook and those present in the courtroom initially believed she was merely a disoriented elderly woman. However, she quietly presented her bar card and systematically refuted the case before their eyes. Do you comprehend the charges against you, or should we proceed more deliberately? Judge Morris Holbrook's tone held a barely concealed hint of amusement. He reclined in his high-backed chair, folded his arms, and looked down at the elderly woman standing alone at the defense table. His voice held the same condescension he directed at blustering defendants who believed they could best him in argument. However, this wasn't a volatile young person with loose trousers and a defiant manner. This was a 72-year-old woman wearing a pale blue cardigan and sturdy orthopedic shoes, standing upright with her hands softly clasped over a well-worn leather handbag. Alma Vernice Whitaker faced charges of obstruction, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest stemming from a protest 2 weeks prior at Bakersfield City Hall. Leland Drury, the prosecutor, appeared to be no older than 30, presenting a polished image with shiny shoes and a demeanor suggesting unwavering self-assurance. He briefly looked towards the gallery, a slight grin on his face. A few individuals in the courtroom suppressed quiet laughter. The bailiff emitted a chuckle. A flicker moved across the stenographer's lips. Alma remained silent. Judge Holbrook struck the file before him. The document stated that he had pushed an officer and incited the crowd to defy orders to leave. Such bold claims from a person of his stature. A fresh ripple of laughter spread through the room. The judge peered over his spectacles towards her. He noted the absence of legal counsel. No attorney, I presume? She then spoke, her voice calm and measured. No, Your Honor, Alma replied, a statement that visibly startled Leland. His head angled as if he hadn't understood. Madam, are you aware this is a criminal proceeding? You are facing genuine charges. Alma did not react. I am fully aware. Would you like to see my bar card? A moment of silence followed. Then some laughter arose, people assuming she meant something else. However, Alma slowly reached into her handbag and produced a laminated card, somewhat yellowed around the edges. She positioned it carefully on the table and pushed it across. Holbrook peered, then leaned in. It displayed State Bar of California. Attorney Alma V. Whitaker, bar number 129804, was admitted on June 17, 1983. The room fell silent. She looked up and adjusted her reading glasses. I received my law degree from Howard in 1982, passed the bar the following summer, spent 12 years as a public defender in Detroit, and another 8 years working civil rights cases here in California, she stated. No one moved. I retired in 2003, she added, but I have kept my license active just in case. Judge Holbrook shifted in his seat. Drury cleared his throat, but said nothing. Alma addressed the judge directly. Before this courtroom determines my fate, I need to clarify some information. I was not organizing a protest. I was attempting to de-escalate it. There is a distinction, and I plan to demonstrate it. Point by point, her tone remained consistent. She did not increase her volume, but each word appeared deliberate and considered. The bailiff looked towards the judge. Holbrook examined her bar card once more, flipping it over, seeming to anticipate it might disintegrate. Alma remained motionless, as if she had held that posture countless times, and she had. Leland Drury then spoke, his voice slightly strained. Your Honor, we cannot confirm this without official. It's authentic, and I have additional documentation in this bag if needed, Alma stated, interrupting. Drury stopped speaking. Judge Holbrook paused, then concluded very well. The court acknowledges the defendant is representing herself. He then paused. A subtle murmur, a sense of bewilderment, rippled through the gallery. But Alma Whitaker offered only a slight, almost unnoticeable acknowledgement to herself. Her purpose wasn't to provide amusement. It was to underscore that appearances could be deceiving. However, Judge Holbrook wasn't prepared for the revelation she was about to unveil. The courtroom still hadn't fully settled. Judge Holbrook now sat with a more upright posture, observing Alma Whitaker with a different kind of focus, one devoid of irony. Leland Drury, who previously appeared relaxed, now seemed uncertain whether he's entered a genuine trial or a trap. His jaw was tight, but his eyes repeatedly looked at the judge as if anticipating support. Alma made adjustments to the microphone before her. I'd like to begin by addressing the prosecution's claims, beginning with the body cam footage. Or more specifically, the lack of it, Leland said. Your Honor, the official report indicates the footage from Officer Grunwald's body camera was deemed irrelevant because of a battery malfunction. This malfunction occurred precisely from the moment the officers arrived at the protest until I was placed in cuffs. She turned slightly toward the jury. It's a significant gap in the record, isn't it? She moved slowly, considering her words, much like lawyers sometimes do. However, this wasn't a performance, it was a genuine issue. According to the arrest report, 3 officers were involved, she stated. Only one officer's body camera footage was examined. The second one had malfunctioned, and the third officer's footage was, what did the report indicate? It wasn't uploaded due to an administrative error. She paused before the jury box and folded her hands. However, the report did include complete transcripts of what I purportedly said, without any accompanying audio. Judge Holbrook turned to Drury. Mr. Drury, is that an accurate representation? Drury cleared his throat. We presented the available materials, Your Honor. The lack of video recording does not invalidate the officer's testimony under oath. Alma didn't wait. Then we should discuss that testimony. Officer Grunewald stated I raised my fist, shouted push forward, and resisted arrest by locking my arms with another protester. I have provided 6 witness statements contradicting this. Each witness was present. They all confirm I positioned myself between the crowd and the police and requested people to move backward. Drury retrieved a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. She also stated a request had been submitted for a subpoena of Officer Grunewald's prior complaints, noting there were 3 related to misconduct during public gatherings, all of which have been dismissed quietly. A ripple of reaction passed through the gallery. Drury raised an objection. She questioned the relevance, asking if the complaints had resulted in a conviction. Alma turned, her voice firm, asserting that a pattern of behavior matters, particularly when it's the same behavior repeated. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room. Please focus, Ms. Whitaker. She nodded once, then presented a second document. I also want to discuss the photograph the prosecution introduced as evidence. Exhibit C, the image depicting me mid-step, encircled by police officers. She displayed the printout. The prosecution asserted this indicated I was advancing towards the officers, seemingly ready to oppose arrest. However, if you examine it closely, she provided a magnified copy to the clerk. You'll observe my palms are raised, open, directed outwards. This is a widely recognized gesture of de-escalation. She looked at the jury again. One doesn't approach armed police with raised hands unless attempting to avert a greater harm. The room was silent. There was no laughter now. Even the gallery had leaned forward. Drury attempted to regain control. Despite those gestures, the defendant disregarded a legal instruction to leave. Alma turned to him slowly. What legal instruction, Mr. Drury? The arrest record details an order issued by Officer Grunwald at 6:32 p.m. A time-stamped photo demonstrated that I was already in restraints by 6:28. She paused, allowing that information to register. This suggested the order was either issued belatedly or wasn't given at all. Judge Holbrook moved, appearing noticeably uneasy. Leland remained silent. Alma inhaled deeply. Therefore, considering the absence of audio recordings, the conflicting timeline, the missing video, and the testimony that disputes witness accounts, what remains to support prosecution? She did not appear self-satisfied. She expressed no sense of triumph. She seemed weary. Weary, as if she's faced this scenario countless times and understood the process intimately. Alma then introduced a surprising element, video evidence that fundamentally altered the case. She placed a small USB drive across the table, explaining that it contained footage recorded by a college student, Victor Ramirez. He had been filming from the second floor of the parking garage, overlooking City Hall. I've already submitted it to the clerk for review, Judge Holbrook observed. What does this video depict? Alma responded directly. The clerk placed the drive into the court screen system. A grainy yet stable video appeared on the monitor. It showed the protest happening below. People were shouting and holding signs, while police officers created a barricade. Then, Alma became visible, her small figure moving through the crowd. She was not shouting. She did not raise her fists. She did not link arms or chant. She was waving her hands down in a motion recognizable to anyone who had previously broken up a fight. Back up! Her voice rang out, surprisingly loud and clear for a woman her age. Don't push, stay calm. The video captured the entire incident. She positioned herself between two officers and a group of teenagers holding cardboard signs. She faced the crowd, not the police. Her hands were raised, again, palms outward. Shortly after, one officer lunged. Another joined in. They seized her arms, pulled her backward, and placed handcuffs on her. She offered no resistance. She displayed no reaction. The room was completely silent. Following an additional 30 seconds of footage, the screen faded to black. Alma addressed Judge Holbrook. The officer's report stated that I charged the barrier, urging others to defy. However, in that video, I was the sole individual attempting to prevent the situation from worsening. That video was not presented by the prosecution, despite Officer Grunewald's knowledge of its existence. According to information, Victor provided a copy to the department the day following the protest. He received no response. Holbrook glanced at the bench, his jaw tense. Mr. Drury was asked, "Did your office receive this footage?" Leland Drury's face appeared pale. He stated, "I was not informed, Your Honor." Alma did not look at him. It wasn't necessary. Mr. Ramirez reported that he provided it to a plainclothes officer, who informed him it wasn't required. He speculated that they had already determined their version of events. A woman in the gallery murmured, "Lord have mercy." The judge's gavel fell once, a gentle sound intended to restore order. He regarded Alma as if encountering her anew. "You stated you retired in 2003? She affirmed, "That is correct." Following 20 years of observing cases similar to this, he inclined his body forward. "And why return now?" Her tone became gentler. "Because I grew weary of awaiting another person's concern." She advanced several steps, not for effect, but because remaining seated was no longer possible. I had hoped that if I simply adhered to the guidelines, remained quiet in retirement, read the paper, and offered occasional assistance, perhaps the world would resolve itself. However, the reality is that Mr. Drury's actions aren't unprecedented. Officer Grunewald's behavior isn't new. This pattern, this tendency of accusing first, investigating later, that's not a recent development. I'm familiar with it. I've observed it since I was 30 years old, and it hasn't diminished. She addressed the jury, her gaze sweeping across the panel. I didn't come here today to create a spectacle. I am here because if this court determines my guilt relying on the testimony of individuals who are not entirely truthful, then what becomes of the next person lacking supporting evidence, or a recorded statement, or the courage to come forward? There was no response. Even Drury had become completely still. Judge Holbrook leaned back slowly in his chair, but just as the situation seemed as dire as it could be for the prosecution, Alma brought the room to a complete standstill. Alma reached into her handbag once more, carefully and deliberately, and produced a folded document. It appeared unassuming, lacking a prominent legal stamp or highlighted sections, simply a standard police transcript printed on regular letter paper. "I'd like to read something into the record," she stated calmly, from Officer Timothy Bragg, who was present that afternoon but not called as a witness. Judge Holbrook scrutinized her. "Was this statement presented to the court prior to today?" Alma responded, shaking her head once. "It was not. I received this document yesterday through a records request. The process was challenging and required me to call upon a few previous obligations." She flattened the paper and began reading. "I arrived on scene at approximately 6:15 p.m. I observed Alma Whitaker moving through the crowd, repeatedly telling people to step back and remain peaceful. I did not witness her push, shout aggressively, or instigate. When I saw her being taken into custody, I was surprised, as she was the only individual I observed attempting to calm tensions. She glanced upward, allowing the quiet to linger. Leland Drury adjusted his position in his chair. His fingers momentarily played with a pen. That officer was not involved in the arrest. Does that mean his account is unreliable? Alma completed his thought, her voice now more pointed. Then why wasn't his name mentioned in the witness list provided by your office? Not even as an addendum. You state your pursuit is of the facts, Mr. Drury, yet the facts that dispute your narrative are discreetly omitted. The judge asked, Mr. Drury, can you confirm whether Officer Bragg was interviewed during the investigation? Drury paused. I'd have to check the original intake file. There's no need, Alma stated. I verified. He submitted his statement the night of the arrest. It was signed, time-stamped, and remained unreviewed, unmentioned. She approached the jury once more. This case was never about disorder. The aim was to make an illustration of an individual who appeared harmless but refused to conform. She indicated softly towards the screen, which remained dark from the preceding video. They hadn't anticipated someone like me would speak, and after I did, they attempted to characterize me as disruptive. That term is employed when people are reluctant to acknowledge their discomfort with being questioned. A juror, a man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed beard, massaged the bridge of his nose and glanced downward. The others watched Alma intently, their attention complete. Judge Hallbrook appeared weary, not due to Alma, but because of the situation unfolding before him. Your Honor, she spoke quietly. I request that all charges be dismissed based on procedural misconduct, incomplete evidence submission, and the suppression of exculpatory testimony. The judge remained silent for a moment. He clasped his hands and looked at the bench, tapping one finger in a steady beat. The courtroom held its breath. Alma remained silent. It wasn't necessary. Eventually, Hallbrook raised his head. I will consider the request and reconvene following a brief pause, he stated. Alma acknowledged his words with a nod and returned to her place. Her hands were firm. There were no written notes, no additional legal representatives, no elaborate ceremony, only years of practice, and a resolute conviction that truth held significance, even when others were unwilling to acknowledge it. As the courtroom cleared for recess, Leland Drury hesitated before rising. He remained in his seat, appearing as someone who had just understood they'd brought a spoon to a gunfight. When Judge Hallbrook attempted to regain control of the proceedings, Alma took an action that quieted the entire room. Upon resuming, the atmosphere had noticeably changed. The laughter and knowing comments had disappeared. Even those in the gallery sat more upright and silently, as if drawn into something more serious than anyone anticipated. Judge Hallbrook returned, his face grave. The gavel struck once, a gesture seemingly perfunctory, and then Alma rose. She avoided legal terminology and refrained from raising her voice. She simply began to speak. There was a period, she started, when I would hurry into courtrooms carrying 20 case files, often repeating the same suit 3 times a week due to financial limitations. This occurred in 1987, in Detroit, at the Public Defender's Office on East Grand Boulevard. Her voice remained steady, yet it carried an underlying sense of weight. I recall representing a 17-year-old, Ronaldo Briggs, who had been arrested because he fit the description of a purse snatcher. He was on his way home from school, carrying a trumpet case. The officer stated that he appeared nervous. One understands what nervous signifies when you are young, black, and walking alone. The courtroom was silent. The prosecution presented no purse, no eyewitness testimony, and no confession. The only evidence was that he attempted to flee when 2 officers emerged from an unmarked van. I paused, allowing my statement to resonate. The legal proceedings lasted 5 weeks. For 5 weeks, I sifted through evidence that others had discarded. I found a receipt for a school lunch inside his backpack, showing a timestamp 10 minutes prior to the crime. The police were dismissed from the case. By then, however, Ronaldo had missed his final band competition and lost his scholarship. Not to inflict blame, but to offer a tangible and lasting message. Cases like his remained with me, not because they were unusual, but because they occurred frequently. Too frequently. She inhaled deeply, centering herself. Do you believe I am here today because I enjoy conflict? Because I long for the extended hours and limited tolerance common in courtrooms such as this? She addressed Judge Holbrook, her tone calm. No, Your Honor, I am here because an unacceptable number of individuals like Ronaldo do not receive a second opportunity. Had I remained silent, had I simply departed when the protest began to escalate, another child might have occupied this seat, a child unable to advocate for themselves. She moved nearer to the bench. I'm weary of feigning that quiet ensures our security. Holbrook's hands were now clasped, his knuckles pale against the wood of the bench. He remained silent. He appeared as though he desired to speak. Alma redirected her gaze toward Drury. You're young? She asked him without harshness. Perhaps you still believe the system is equitable until demonstrated otherwise. However, that's inaccurate. The system is imperfect until someone insists on something superior. That's the duty. If you are unwilling to accept that responsibility, then this is not the appropriate venue, Drury said, his face reddening. He remained silent, unable to answer. Alma went back to her place. The quiet persisted. After a minute, Judge Holbrook made a sound as he cleared his throat and looked toward the clerk. But first he touched his forehead, as if the past was suddenly heavy upon him as well. He began to speak, then stopped. This wasn't for effect. It was simply a moment of hesitation. He appeared, for the first time in years, like a man questioning the words before him. I have examined the evidence presented by the defense, he stated finally, referencing the witness video, the police transcript, and the timing discrepancies. His voice faltered but subtly. This case was not managed appropriately, and it is the court's view that proceeding would be unfair. The courtroom was utterly silent. Ms. Whitaker, he said, his tone now more strained, this court dismisses all charges. A hush fell. There were no cheers, no vocal reactions, just a stunned silence, as if people were waiting for direction on how to respond. Alma did not smile. She closed her bag, rose, and nodded. This was not a gesture of triumph, but of respect. At that moment, Judge Holbrook, for the first time in years, found himself speechless. Within the courthouse, the sunlight streamed in, bright, dry, and sharp, much as it always did in Bakersfield around noon. Alma descended the courthouse stairs deliberately, not due to any physical weakness, but because she understood the value of savoring significant moments. She held her handbag securely beneath one arm, the soles of her shoes making a quiet sound against the pavement. Journalists waited expectantly on the sidewalk, their cameras already recording, microphones extended like lures. Many of them hadn't been present when the trial commenced. News had circulated regarding the retired black woman who entered the courtroom unaccompanied and emerged with the truth. Ms. Whitaker, are you considering legal action against the city? Did you anticipate the case's dismissal? Do you identify as an activist? She remained silent, not to evade attention, but because she had already spoken her piece, and that courtroom had been her sole intended audience. A small group of people waited for her at the foot of the steps. They weren't journalists. They were younger, late teens, perhaps early 20s, wearing hoodies, carrying backpacks, and sporting worn sneakers. Alma recognized one of them as Victor Ramirez, the student who had filmed the video. He kept his phone lowered, no longer recording, simply observing her. A young woman moved forward. She appeared to be just out of high school, her eyes bright and nervous. Ms. Whitaker, she said, I hope to be a lawyer someday, like you. Alma smiled for the first time all day. She offered a small smile, indicating her attention. The girl continued, that was the first time I saw someone actually win in court like that. You didn't just fight. You taught. Alma met her gaze directly. Then remember what you saw, because it won't always look that way. Most days it'll feel like pushing a brick wall uphill with your bare hands, and no one will applaud you. But you push anyway. Victor then spoke. The system had never anticipated someone like you possessing the ability to retaliate. I understand, she replied softly. They relied on it. A different boy interjected, could we learn from you? Perhaps by observing you closely, or conducting an interview, or something similar. You've witnessed events we've only read about. Alma surveyed the group, hesitating. She didn't aspire to be anyone's rescuer, yet she detected something within their gazes she hadn't observed in a considerable time. Hope intertwined with impatience. That familiar intensity. She straightened the handle of her bag. I avoid social media platforms. While I don't maintain a website, I still retain the ability to teach. Please bring your questions, and I'll provide the coffee. The group responded with quiet laughter. Victor's eyes lit up. Behind them, Judge Holbrook stood at the top of the stairs, observing everything. He was not accompanied by deputies at this time. He wore a blazer and a loose tie instead of a robe. For a brief moment, he seemed poised to speak, but then he remained silent. He observed Alma disappear around the corner with the children, her form gradually diminishing in the late afternoon sunlight. Returning inside, Leland Drury remained at his desk, his case file spread out but unexamined. His demeanor had altered. The usual self-satisfaction was absent. The characteristic severity softened. He looked at Alma's bar card resting on the bench, momentarily overlooked. Then, he reached for it, not to challenge it, but to review it. That name, that date, that accumulation of experience. The courtroom stood deserted now, yet something had changed within him. Perhaps not enough to alter everything immediately, but potentially enough to make him reconsider in the future. For the first time, he had witnessed the distinction between winning a case and truly comprehending justice. However, what Alma subsequently conveyed to those kids provided them with something beyond legal counsel. It offered them a foundation for hope. The diner on Union Avenue was nearly empty when Alma sat down with the kids that evening. She selected the booth by the window, the very one she'd occupied years ago when she used to meet with apprehensive clients who lacked confidence in courtrooms. The light from the setting sun illuminated the worn leather seats and transformed the Formica table a warm, golden hue. Victor requested coffee, despite not typically consuming it. The young woman, identified as Kenya, asked for iced tea and retrieved a notebook, already filled with notes. The remaining individuals positioned themselves closer, as if witnessing a solemn event. Alma didn't begin a lecture. She stirred her cup deliberately, then remarked, "You know the first thing they teach you in law school?" Victor blinked. "The Constitution?" She smiled faintly. "No, they teach you how to read a case file without getting emotional, how to separate the fact from the feelings, how to argue without letting it get under your skin." Kenya leaned forward. "Is that a good thing?" "It's necessary," Alma said, "but dangerous, too. The tendency to overlook the individuals behind the data can be insidious. It's easy to lose sight of the human element." She paused, setting her spoon down and meeting their gazes. "Remember the people." A quiet stillness settled over the group, not awkward but contemplative. One of the boys, previously silent, then voiced a question. "But how does one continue when there's no audience?" Alma released a slow breath, feeling the gravity of that inquiry. "You persist because occasionally someone is paying attention. They will only grasp the truth if it's spoken aloud, even when your voice trembles, even when the atmosphere chills." Kenya jotted notes rapidly in her notebook, but Alma countered, "Don't record this. Experience it. Make errors. Watch it, but maintain your integrity." Victor reclined in the booth. "Do you ever question it?" Remaining engaged for this duration, Alma hesitated. Her fingers followed the edge of her cup. "The loss of each client who deserved to be released weighed on me. Witnessing officers fabricate stories without hesitation caused me regret. And observing juries prioritize ease over honesty often made me question the value of my efforts." She paused, gazing out the window, but then I recalled the individuals who were ultimately freed. Those whose voices were amplified, those who contacted me 5 years later simply to express gratitude. That is what truly holds significance. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Alma concluded her coffee and rose. The check had already been taken care of. Kenya had discreetly placed the bills beneath the sugar jar. Standing outside on the sidewalk, the children paused, seeming reluctant for the evening to conclude. Alma addressed them. "Do you want to change the system?" They affirmed. "Then don't merely study it. Challenge it. Pose more insightful questions." Confront the absence of discussion. Engage your intellect. Utilize your mobility. Employ your writing. And when someone advises you to wait your turn, inquire as to their reasoning for believing it's not your turn already. Kenya wiped her eyes. The others remained silent, observing her intently. Then Alma spoke a final statement. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be quiet. Following this, she proceeded towards the bus stop without turning back. Some stories transcend sensational news. They serve as reminders. That authority isn't consistently found in ceremonial garments or official positions, nor does it originate from the most vocal individual. Occasionally, it originates from a woman wearing a cardigan, managing the system as if she's performed this task previously. Because she has. When people inquire about the appearance of justice, they should recall her name, Alma Vernice Whitaker. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who would benefit from hearing it. And if you agree that wisdom isn't dictated by attire, please subscribe to hear more authentic stories that help us understand ourselves. Darius Whitfield arrived in a tailored suit, prepared to lead a major tech summit. However, hotel staff requested he wait outside. What followed had a significant impact on the entire company. It was just before 8 a.m. when Darius Whitfield exited his black Lincoln Continental onto the hotel's circular driveway in downtown San Jose. He adjusted the cuff of his navy blue suit jacket, the tailored fabric reflecting the morning light. He was impeccably dressed, with sharp lines, a crisp shirt, and Italian leather shoes. He exuded purpose and meticulousness, yet the valet remained still, not taking a single step. Darius held his keys casually in one hand and briefly looked over. The young man averted his gaze, feigning a check of his phone, then turned to the car behind Darius. Hey, can you park this one? The valet asked his coworker, gesturing past Darius without acknowledging him. Darius observed the glass doors of the hotel. They lacked prominent signage. No red carpet, just clean glass and a tranquil foyer. There was nothing to indicate what would happen within those walls. He retrieved his keys, parked his car himself, and walked across the drive. Upon opening the front door, he observed a slight change in the concierge's smile. It disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Can I help you? The woman at the front desk inquired without looking up. Yes, Darius replied. I'm here for the SummitNet conference. I believe you have a Redwood room reserved for us. The woman quickly examined his face, frowned, and then looked back at her screen. Do you work for one of the vendors? She asked. No, I'm the CEO. She blinked. Right? Could you wait outside for a moment? We're still prepping the space. He paused. I'm also the keynote speaker. There was no apology, no moment of realization. Just a tight smile and a firm response. Still, we're not quite ready. Please wait outside. A colleague, a young man wearing a blazer and with a walkie-talkie attached to his belt, emerged behind her. He scrutinized Darius from head to toe, as if verifying his credentials. Are you with security? He inquired, speaking quietly. I am Darius Whitfield. Darius responded calmly. The conference you're holding today? I manage it. A brief pause. The man then angled his head towards the entrance. Please wait a moment, sir. We will find someone to escort you. Darius exhaled slowly and deliberately. Attendees began to gather. Several initial investors were among the first to arrive. A white man wearing a gray plaid suit was immediately met with handshakes and friendly expressions. He wasn't asked to wait in the lobby. Darius noticed him, but the man seemed to hardly acknowledge him and proceeded through the lobby, accompanied by the same staff who had previously requested Darius to wait outside. The hotel doors closed behind him with a quiet hiss. Darius now stood again just outside the main entrance on the pavement. He glanced at his watch. The time read 8:09. His presentation wasn't scheduled for another 51 minutes. He possessed time. However, an unsettling sensation stirred within him. It wasn't anger, it was something more profound. Across the street, a mother guided a stroller toward the coffee shop. A bus emitted a hiss as it halted at the corner. Life continued its course, and yet Darius remained stationary. A mature man who had established a company from its foundation. Feeling as though he was an outsider, due to his appearance not aligning with preconceived notions. His phone vibrated in his pocket. "Boss," the voice of his assistant, Jalen, spoke. "Just checking. Did they greet you yet?" Darius stared at the hotel doors, his tone calm. "Not exactly. But that's when something shifted. Not in them, but in him." Jalen was still on the line, his voice low but alert. "What do you mean, not exactly?" Darius replied. "They asked me to wait outside." There was a pause, not shock, not disbelief, just silence. Jalen knew from his time working with Darius that his measured, toneless speech indicated more than just a report. He was analyzing and organizing the information. "Wanting to come down?" Jalen inquired. "No, Darius replied. Stay with the investors. They'll be arriving within the next 15 minutes. Let me manage this." He ended the call, adjusted his tie, and returned through the doors. Inside, the same woman at the front desk noticed him, but her expression remained unchanged. "I believe I requested you wait outside, sir," she stated, inputting information on the keyboard. "And I did wait," Darius said directly. "Now, I wish to speak with the event coordinator. My name is Darius Whitfield. I am the founder and CEO of Whitfield Dynamics. We reserved the Redwood Room and 2 floors of your suites for this conference." This time, she made direct eye contact with him. However, there was no apology offered, just a brief hesitation, as if she was assessing whether this was a joke. "Mr. Whitmore, was it?" "Whitfield." A pause. She turned to the young man in the blazer. "Can you call Gina from events?" The man nodded and walked off. Simultaneously, a bellhop wheeled by with a luggage cart stacked with briefcases. Darius stepped aside and caught a glimpse of 2 of his board members stepping out of the elevator, each with branded SummitNet conference badges clipped to their suits. They greeted a hotel manager who seemed to have appeared suddenly to shake their hands. Darius subtly raised a hand, seeking acknowledgement. The manager briefly looked at him, paused, and then looked away. "Ma'am," Darius stated calmly, refocusing on the front desk. "Let me repeat this. I am not a guest. I am not affiliated with security. I am not making a delivery. I am the cause of these people being here. I orchestrated this entire summit. I brought 60 of the most influential investors in West Coast tech into this building today." The woman began to speak, but the man holding the walkie-talkie returned before she could utter a word. "She's on her way," he announced. Following a brief silence, he inquired, "You're really the CEO?" Darius offered a subtle smile. "I didn't just build this company, I financed it. I wrote the first line of code. I signed a contract with this hotel. And I chose this location because I believed in the idea of professional courtesy." Both individuals looked at him. He continued, "I've got $5 billion under management. I was nearly ready to believe you could assist with that." The ensuing quiet felt unusual. It wasn't a reaction of doubt. It was awkwardness. The woman at the reception desk moved, appearing hesitant. Before she could respond, Gina from events entered the lobby quickly, carrying a folder and already speaking. "Mr. Whitfield, I sincerely apologize for the delay. We weren't notified of your arrival. Please come with me. The Redwood Room is prepared, and coffee is being served. The investors are already assembling." The same staff who had requested he step outside now retreated, as if dividing water. Darius followed Gina past the desk, past the man with the walkie-talkie, and past the woman whose face was flushed now. Whether from embarrassment or an unknown reason, he remained silent. Explanation was unnecessary, because their misunderstanding wasn't a man attempting to enter a place where he wasn't welcome. What they overlooked, what they were unwilling to acknowledge, was a man who held ownership of the space. Remaining silent, allowing them the opportunity to adjust their actions, they did not. However, what followed would not be a demonstration of anger. Instead, it would serve as a lesson in remembrance, and Darius possessed a remarkable memory. The Redwood Room was located at the rear of the hotel's conference wing, beyond a hallway adorned with abstract artwork and subdued carpeting. Within, the lighting had been lowered in preparation for the initial presentation. Chairs were arranged in rows, a podium displayed the SummitNet logo, and a side table held bottled water and elegant name placards. Darius quickly surveyed the room. Jalen was positioned at the front, adjusting sound levels with the AV technician. Investors were arriving, engaging in hushed conversations over coffee. Unbeknownst to everyone, something had occurred in the lobby. He didn't proceed to the podium, not yet. Instead, he entered a side room, the private lounge reserved for speakers, and shut the door. He then retrieved his phone. "Tammy," he exclaimed as his head of operations answered. "We're moving the summit." There was no surprise audible on the other end. Tammy was accustomed to this manner of communication. "Today?" she inquired. "Right now," he replied. "You want to relocate 50 people with less than an hour's notice?" "Not want. Need," he corrected. She refrained from questioning further. "You want me to call the Fairmont or the Hayes?" "Hayes," he stated. "I want every investor redirected there. Make sure they understand this isn't a scheduling issue. It's a matter of principle. I will provide further details when appropriate. Please cancel the remainder of our reservation at Willow Creek Manor. Suites were included. If there's resistance to releasing the booking, please charge any associated penalties to me directly." Tammy released a slow breath. "Acknowledged. Contact Jalen as well. Instruct him to postpone the opening and redirect the guests." Subsequently, Darius concluded the call. There was no raised voices, no abrupt phone placement, only decisive action, efficient and straightforward. He observed his image reflected in the lounge's dark glass window. He felt neither justified nor triumphant. He simply felt weary. Weary of entering spaces where people perceived everything about him except his true self. A gentle knock sounded. It was Jalen. "Shall we review the slides?" Darius declined. "Plans have changed." Jalen looked surprised. "Are we departing?" "I'm already handling it." It took a moment, but then Jalen understood. They hadn't attempted to rectify the situation, had they? "No. Should I inform the board?" "I'm taking care of it directly. Please ensure the guests proceed." No one was to acknowledge the hotel on departure. Within minutes, Jalen was discreetly communicating the situation through subtle handshakes and nods. "Emergency relocation," he murmured to one group. "We've got a superior setup just a few blocks over," he informed another. "Mr. Whitfield will provide details." Simultaneously, Tammy was contacting the Hayes, securing their backup venue, arranging staff, transferring AV equipment, and lunch catering. Darius revisited the Redwood room a single time, returning to retrieve his notes and laptop. A hotel manager then emerged, his expression strained, holding a folder. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm informed there was an error at the front desk earlier today, and I want to offer a personal apology. It was never our aim to cause offense." Darius interjected smoothly. "You simply demonstrated a lack of standards. This isn't a matter of pride, it's about expectations." The manager appeared taken aback. "Is there a way we can rectify this?" Darius closed his laptop case and looked at him. "You had your chance." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The only thing louder than outrage is absence. The room, moments earlier filled with leading investors, was emptying quickly. As Darius left through the same lobby where he's been instructed to wait, he noticed the desk clerk watching him, her lips pressed tightly. The young man with the walkie-talkie had disappeared. He continued walking. A black SUV was waiting outside. The driver opened the door. Darius got in, his phone already ringing. However, this wasn't the conclusion of the day's events. It was merely the point at which others began to arrive. When the first tray of croissants reached the now half-empty Redwood room, most of the guests had already departed, assembling in the grand atrium of the Hayes, San Jose's other luxury hotel. The staff at that location required no introduction to Darius. The reception gave him a welcome as if they had anticipated this for weeks. Simultaneously, at the initial hotel, the front desk staff appeared perplexed. The receptionist repeatedly examined her screen, reviewing the guest list and then the room blocks. A puzzled expression crossed her face as she reached for the phone. "Gina," she said, "the conference guests are departing." Gina, the events coordinator, was in the loading bay assisting the AV team in packing up equipment. "What do you mean leaving?" she inquired. "I mean guests are checking out." Access was being revoked. Several individuals simply departed without comment. Within fewer than 20 minutes, the lobby, previously bustling with greetings and business cards, showed noticeable absences. Conference signs remained in place, but the atmosphere dissipated quickly. Then the manager received a phone call. "Sir, the company has terminated all reservations." He appeared stunned. "That's impossible. It's summit day." But it was, in fact, possible. The situation unfolded rapidly. Calls began pouring in. The front desk clerk appeared panicked, attempting to get the manager's attention while also handling a call from housekeeping. A guest had just departed without notification, according to reports. Another client stated they would not be paying for today's brunch. "Refer them to Mr. Whitfield," someone else added. A security guard then approached the manager. "That SUV outside? It transported him and several others. They're no longer present." The shift felt like a chain reaction, with one problem triggering another. Without any outbursts or blame, there was simply a disappearance. At the Hays, Darius addressed the group, standing before a large projection screen in a bright conference room. He spoke deliberately and plainly, showing no indication of resentment. "Before we start, I'd like to express my gratitude for your adaptability. I understand the change of location was unforeseen, but I think the place we meet reflects what we prioritize." A quiet acknowledgement rippled through the room. "I selected that previous hotel due to its reputation, the quality of its service, and its convenient location near your offices. However, this morning, I was reminded that a refined lobby and a 5-star rating do not ensure courtesy." He paused. "I was requested to wait outside, twice, by staff who did not once inquire about my name. I parked my own vehicle. I reintroduced myself. I clarified my identity. Yet in that environment, none of it seemed significant. A few expressions grew strained. Heads shook. Some of you may be surprised by this. Others, perhaps not." He paused briefly. "However, I don't endorse raising voices. I don't endorse diminishing others simply to demonstrate a point. I endorse progress. And today, we are making progress. To a location that acknowledges us, listens to us, and handles our business with the appropriate level of importance." The audience responded with applause, motivated by esteem, not sympathy. In the rear, Jalen observed, arms crossed, exhibiting pride. Simultaneously, at the initial hotel, the conference signage was being removed. Maintenance personnel removed untouched coffee urns. A catering team remained still, observing the scene and uncertain whether to start preparing the food. The manager examined a document he held. It was a formal notification from Whitfield Dynamics, ending their agreement, effective immediately. There would be no legal action or demands, only a straightforward severance payment and a significant financial cost. He contacted the general manager. "We're out of the event," he stated. "How?" the general manager asked. The unidentified guest was the event itself. While the hotel attempted to address what it had overlooked, Darius was poised to reveal a previously unknown aspect of his own history. The day progressed into the late afternoon. The sun cast long shadows across the street as Darius sat in the back seat of the SUV, his suit jacket folded neatly beside him. He had removed his tie, revealing the open collar of a white shirt, and a weary expression filled his eyes. Jalen sat beside him, reviewing emails on his tablet. "Are you certain you don't want me to draft a public statement?" Jalen inquired. "People are already beginning to post. Someone from Marlowe and Banks recorded a video of you exiting." Darius declined. "Let them speak. I am not trying to become popular online." He reclined against the seat. The engine emitted a low hum. Outside, children cycled along the sidewalk, their laughter echoing. A woman wearing a red jacket assisted an elderly gentleman from a rideshare and into a small dental office. It was unremarkable, simply the day proceeding as usual. A sense of heaviness filled the car. "Can I ask you something?" Jalen asked, without lifting his gaze. "Go ahead. Why didn't you just confront them?" He continued. "They deserved it, considering everything." Darius hesitated before responding, his gaze fixed on the window. Finally, he said, "When I was 19, I attended my first interview with a resume detailing summer jobs and a GPA that promised opportunity. The receptionist inquired if I was delivering food. I smiled, confirmed that I wasn't, and waited 2 hours. The interview was never scheduled. It was an oversight. I was present and observed. Jalen looked around, remaining silent. I had the option to create a disturbance, to draw attention, but I chose not to. I departed, seeking alternative exits, finding another and then another. He moved his hands together, as though recalling the sensation of a steering wheel from years ago. For a significant portion of my life, I believe that achieving certain milestones, accumulating degrees, wealth, and professional attire, would dispel certain preconceptions. He glanced towards Jalen. Jalen nodded slowly. It wasn't simply another receptionist. It was a complete hotel, a defining moment. Exactly, Darius affirmed. That's why I left. Because I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't require them to understand. I needed the observers to witness what it appears like when you decline to plead for respect that you have already earned. He exhaled, looking out the window again. My father used to say, you can't force people to see you, but you can choose where you won't be invisible. Jalen relaxed against the seat, allowing the thought to linger. The vehicle paused at a traffic signal. Directly ahead, a billboard displayed an advertisement for a startup accelerator. It featured youthful faces, modern logos, and vibrant colors. Jalen smiled. You ever imagine we would be the ones leading those programs, rather than seeking acceptance into them? Darius chuckled. Every day, and it still feels unreal occasionally. The SUV came to a halt before the Whitfield Dynamics building, a structure of glass, steel, and understated confidence. Upon exiting, the lobby receptionist waved, already summoning the elevator. During the ascent, Jalen initiated conversation. Have you ever considered sharing that story? He asked. The 19-year-old version? Darius replied, perhaps. Not seeking sympathy, but for clarity, because people often assume these incidents are isolated events. A single bad day, a single impolite employee. However, it's rarely about a solitary moment. It's about recurring patterns, repeated, honed, and concealed. He disembarked the elevator, briefcase in his grasp. Addressing problems requires acknowledgement, but it's also possible to demonstrate how to disengage with grace. What Darius didn't understand was that his actions, his silent resistance, were quickly gaining wider attention. The consequences began subtly. They didn't appear in news reports. There was no public condemnation. Instead, there were hushed conversations in meeting rooms. Then, a few emails circulated. By midweek, 3 other companies had discreetly canceled their reservations at the same hotel. There were no official declarations. No demonstrations. We're shifting our strategy. However, the discussions were very specific. Are you aware of what occurred with the Whitfield Dynamics team? We cannot accept that level of risk associated with our reputation. Could you remind me of the alternative venue? The hotel attempted to repair the situation. A regional sales director contacted Whitfield Dynamics, proposing complimentary bookings for the upcoming quarter, complimentary executive suites, and even spa credits for visiting investors. The proposal was not approved. Tammy reviewed it, then closed and marked the email as resolved. Darius did not respond, as trust, once broken, cannot be restored with price reductions. This wasn't a matter of incorrect charges. It concerned the events permitted under supervision. Simultaneously, news of the relocation reached media outlets. A technology news source reported on the sequence of events. It was not a critical piece, but rather a recounting of the timeline, the events, the individuals who witnessed them, and the change in location. A quiet, thoughtful pause followed. However, the narrative circulated through email accounts, then in messaging apps, and ultimately during after-work gatherings where young Black professionals toasted Darius Whitfield. Not for his response, but for his restraint. Because occasionally, the most impactful action isn't a forceful reaction. It's disengaging, as if the situation wasn't worthy of your presence. The Whitfield Dynamics office was silent as Darius presided over a boardroom meeting. He sat at the head of the table, accompanied by 4 senior staff members and 3 partners from a private equity group based in Seattle. An investor spoke, commenting, "We've heard about the switch. People are still discussing it." Darius shifted back a little. "Is that a concern for you?" inquired one of the investors. "Not at all," the man replied. It actually conveyed more about your leadership style than the slide deck ever did, another investor added. Few possess that level of composure when facing intense situations. That's the basis of trust. Darius offered a subtle acknowledgement, refraining from any display of triumph. The focus wasn't about victory, it was about adhering to fair practices from the outset. Later that evening, he walked the quiet floor of the office, pausing to observe a whiteboard covered with written diagrams, sticky notes, and equations. Jalen was present as well, drinking from a chipped mug. "Did you review the report?" he inquired. "Yes, I did." The detail about the valet's actions was omitted, Darius noted. "They always leave something out," he said. "Doesn't matter," Jalen added. "People understand the situation. Those who needed to know received the message." Darius reviewed the whiteboard. "When we constructed this establishment, I didn't desire it to be ostentatious. I didn't want visitors to feel impressed. I wanted them to feel acknowledged. That's the key distinction," Jalen affirmed. "Do they see you now?" Darius responded softly. "They always recognized me. They simply never anticipated I would be the one authorizing the payments." He turned toward his office, extinguished the lights, and hesitated in the doorway. "Let's continue building," he stated. However, before he departed for the evening, there was one more individual Darius needed to speak with, someone who served as a reminder of the importance of moments such as this. The following morning, Darius stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, holding a newly brewed mug of black coffee. The sky appeared as a flat silver, creating a sense of quietness and distance. A gentle knock sounded at the door. "Come in," he replied without turning. The door opened. A young man entered. This was Elijah Green, in his mid-20s, intelligent but still inexperienced, a junior analyst at Whitefield Dynamics. He held a folder, seeming hesitant about the timing. "You said you wanted to meet?" Elijah inquired. Darius turned, offering a brief nod and indicating the chair opposite him. Elijah took a seat, placing the folder on his lap without opening it. His gaze shifted, suggesting uncertainty about where to start. I'm aware of what occurred at the hotel," he finally stated. "Some of us were discussing it in the lunchroom yesterday." Darius remained silent, allowing the quiet to linger, not awkwardly, but calmly. "I suppose I simply wanted to inquire. How do you manage to not be affected by it?" Elijah asked. "How do you keep your composure when it's so apparent?" Darius offered a slight smile. "Do you imagine I remain composed?" Elijah hesitated. "Didn't I?" "No, Darius replied. "I simply didn't reveal it." He placed his coffee down. "You know what they perceived when I entered that hotel. A man present in a location they didn't anticipate. Nothing else held significance. Not the professional obligations, not the agreements, not the convention. Only their own conception of what authority embodies and who doesn't align with it." Elijah moved closer. "Then why not challenge them? Why not expose them publicly?" "Because the world is already aware," Darius explained. "That's not the core issue. The true challenge lies in demonstrating to future generations that you don't require their validation to take action. You don't need their authorization to feel like you belong," Elijah affirmed thoughtfully. "You navigated the situation with composure," he commented. "If it had been me, I'm unsure," Darius continued. "That's the key point. You don't need certainty. You simply need to retain this understanding. Don't sacrifice your dignity because of another person's lack of understanding. If they misunderstand you, allow it. However, ensure the foundation you're establishing for yourself, your company, your name, and your team creates a sense of inclusivity for everyone." Elijah paused, the sentiment resonating more deeply than anticipated. "That's the essence of leadership," Darius stated. "It's not about reacting aggressively. It's about creating opportunities elsewhere." A brief silence followed. Then Darius moved closer. "Now what's in here?" he asked, gesturing to the folder Elijah had brought. "Oh, right," Elijah responded, seeming to refocus. "It's a new proposal from the behavioral data team. We're incorporating changes based on your feedback from last week." Darius opened the folder and quickly reviewed the first page. "Excellent. Let's schedule a meeting with the team this afternoon." Elijah started to leave, pausing at the doorway. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Darius replied. "For showing us how to progress." He acknowledged Elijah with a subtle nod. Elijah departed the room. Outside, traffic flowed consistently, as if the world remained oblivious to what had transpired. However, those who had observed would not easily forget. This extended beyond a single man and one hotel. It encompassed all the rooms people enter where someone perceives only a partial truth. It was about the subtle ways authority can exert itself, through initiative, not response. And it concerned altering the established order without accepting the tools offered. If this narrative resonated with you deeply, if it prompted reflection on how you navigate environments not designed for you, please discuss it. Share your thoughts. And remember to subscribe to receive more true stories demonstrating the remarkable power of quiet strength.